Okay, so the first thing you need to think about when you are looking to build a natural shelter is find an area of woodland that actually has lots of deadfall, lots of branches and logs that are accessible for you to build. The last thing you want to do is to be dragging these logs miles to your shelter. You expend all your energy, you're going to get tired quickly. So find an area where there's lots of deadfall. At the moment I'm in a woodland, I'm in a pine forest, but it's right adjacent to a deciduous forest. So it's quite nice. I've got a mixture of both pine trees and other trees, evergreen trees as well, where I can use those leaves as shelter. First thing I'm going to do is, obviously I found my area of woodland that's got lots of deadfall now. I'm going to now look for basically 2 trees to put my kind of ridge log in, the middle log, and I'm going to scout around. I don't want to find a piece of rotten wood. It needs to be kind of, if it's deadfall obviously it's going to be dying, but it needs to be rigid. This is an important pole, this area, this ridge line. It's the strength of basically it's the strength of the shelter, and it's going to be the main part of the A-frame that's holding it up. So I'm going to have a scout around, see if I can find the right sized one as well, but I'll also show you the site of where I'm going to build this shelter. So I've chosen my site. I've got big tree here, big pine tree here, and then another tree there, and what I'm going to do is find a log. There's some long deadfall over there that's long enough to lie basically up at an angle about that long. So I'll need to not measure it out, but just roughly gauge an idea that it needs to be roughly probably about 5 or 6 foot longer than the distance in between here. That way it will stick out like that, and I can lean it up and pinch it in between these 2 trees like that, and that will form the beginning of the A-frame, and then I can put smaller logs down the side of it. Okay, one of the things you want to be wary of, this looks like a nice long ridge. This could be a really good ridge log. It's very long, it's not too thick, so it's not too heavy to lift. However, what you want to be wary of is this one, if you can see, is actually touching the ground. So it's been on the ground a while, and if I roll this over, you'll see, especially up this end, if you have a look, if I roll this over, you can see fungi starting to grow here, and that's definitely could be a weakness in the log, because it's been on that ground, it's very damp. I can feel that it's actually very supple, and that it's, to be honest, quite rotten, so this could break quite easily under pressure. So be wary of picking one straight off of the ground. I found a different one that is slightly off the ground, and I'll just go and show you now. Okay, if you look at this one here, it's actually, as it's fallen down, it's about half a foot off the ground, almost all the way along. So for me, that is ideal. It's been kept off the ground, it's been kept sort of off the damp. It should be fairly dry, this one, and basically I'm going to cut it at the right length and definitely use this one as my ridge pole. But as a little tip for you, just be wary if they're lying dead on the ground, they may be a bit mouldy, but this one has only been on the ground at the bottom end, but this whole part up here has been up off the ground, so it should be a lot drier than the other logs, because we've had quite a bit of rain recently. Okay, so at the moment this log is too long for what I need. So basically I'm going to cut this log here. I've got a folding saw here. This is the Barco Laplander, and you can see a review of this actually on our channel, TA Outdoors. I'll put a little link up to it in a box in the corner. So I'm just going to saw this bit here. It feels nice and dry, it's been off the ground. I'm going to saw it longer than I'd need it to begin with. There's nothing worse than cutting it too short and then it not being able to fit in the gap between those 2 trees. So I'm going to saw it a little bit longer than I normally would have it. As you're sawing, the deeper you get into a log, generally these 2 bits, because of the weight of this log pulling down, they'll tend to pinch together like that, and your blade gets stuck. So if you can lift the log up a bit, it then opens up that gap, and it prevents your saw from getting pinched. As you can see here, the reason I cut that angle on that top section is just so it can fit snugly against here. I noticed there was a knot in the tree just here that was kind of protruding, so I've used that to my advantage, cut an angle in there, and now I can put all my weight on that top ridge pole, and that is not going anywhere. The base is tucked in nicely down there, and you can see it's pushed up against that tree. That way, any weight pushing that way is going to put pressure on the tree, so it creates basically equal weight on the tree. But yeah, there's a little tip there. If you cut an angle on that top section, just helps it pinch in a bit more. And now that's not going anywhere. Now I can start to collect sort of smaller size logs just for the edge of the A-frames. The other thing is, with these bits here, these notches, which you often get in felled trees that have either been felled or they've just fallen over in a storm, I would not cut these off. I would not pull these off. These can act as a good support for those logs going down the side. There's another one here. Perhaps I'd make it smaller. I might nick it off there. But other than that, these are really handy to actually lean logs against, so I wouldn't cut these ones off. So now, as you can see, I've collected a few logs down there, varying different sizes. I'm going to collect a lot more. The longer you have your side poles coming out, your side logs, the wider your section will be. So I want mine not too wide really, because it's a one-person shelter, but I can place them more vertical. If I see from this angle, if I place them more vertical there, it's going to be a narrow angle on my A-frame. If I place them wide there, then I'll have more space as I go in. Okay, so you can see the actual beginnings of the A-frame shelter. I've got my ridge log going down here, and then I've got the first part of the A. You can actually see that, a log coming down here and a log coming down there. I've actually cut these so they're the exact same height. The rest of the logs I probably won't really cut, takes a bit more time, but if you look, they're actually slightly at an angle this way towards this tree here, and all that's to do is to help basically even the pressure on this ridge log. All the rest of them will be leaning slightly, just slightly forward, and if they're all leaning the same way, then that's equal pressure then on this ridge log, and it should make for a more stable support. Okay, wood is all collected in different sizes. Time to build. Well, there we go. I've pretty much finished the majority of the A-frame shelter. I've still got a few gaps to fill in, but I'm a bit restricted with time. That's taken me pretty much an hour. That's not including the filming that obviously I've done in between as well. So yeah, I'd say it takes about an hour probably by the time you've collected all your logs and things like that. I've tested it, I've pushed against it, I've put a lot of my body weight against it, just to double check that everything is stable and secure. It's a good way of checking, just pushing against it at different angles just to check that everything is secure. What I've done is like a cross latching up the top, going all the way up the top, so I've cross latched it basically just to give it that added support and to ensure that all branches, all the logs are actually leaning properly against that ridge log. It's important that they come over the top of the ridge log here, just so they got that support on that actual ridge log, and not they won't then slip down below and fall down. So it's more for safety reasons really, just to try and keep that cross latching going and then filling in the gaps with other logs. Okay, next step is I'm in a pine forest and there's lots of bracken and fern over just behind me, so I'm going to collect a load of bracken up and use that just to kind of waterproof, rainproof this A-frame shelter. As you can see, lots of bracken here. I'm coming into mid-October now, so it's starting to die back. So ideally I'd do this kind of shelter in the summer and do an overnighter in the summer, but I thought I'd do a video to show you guys just how to make it. But I'm going to use this bracken, definitely, there's plenty of it there. Cut it down near the base, near the roots, and just be careful, don't pull it with your hands. Okay, I was saying about pulling it with your hands. The reason why is I've got a bit that's kind of dying back here. If you pull here with your hands, yes, most of the time you probably would be able to pull it out. However, your hand can generally slip, and as it slips it cuts through here as you pull through, and it actually cuts up your hand quite badly. So I suggest either using a knife or just a small blade just to nick it at the roots there. You do want this long bit here, because this is going to go in between those logs on the A-frame shelter and help pinch it in place. If you just pull up the top, the actual leaf part up here, if you just pull that off, then you've got nothing to secure it to your shelter. So definitely use the majority of that to help secure it to your shelter. Try not to use your hands. It will, if you skid, it will cut your hands up. Okay, so got about 5 minutes worth here, 3 batches of bracken or fern, and gonna put this now onto the shelter, and I'll show you why I left that stalk long when I cut it. Okay, so here's my fern or bracken with the long stalk. The reason why is that I can tuck it facing backwards in these gaps, push it in there, and then that sits nice and snug. Now with lots of those in there, I can get that fitting nice and tight, and if the stalk's pushing too far into the actual shelter, then I can just snip off the ends. But now I'm going to fill it up with the rest of these and see what we get. Okay, so almost a finished article really. I'm strapped for time now, so I need to head back. But as you can see, I've placed a load of ferns. It doesn't look like much on the outside. After some wind and rain, that will start to settle down. That'll probably last a few weeks before they start to die off and thin out. But you know, if you're doing short overnighters in the summer, it's, you know, brilliant really. That's sort of one side, and I told you about leaving those stalks long on the fern or the bracken, and that definitely helps to lock it all in place. This is the other side. Again, you can see, you wouldn't even know it's a shelter really. It looks a bit messy from this side, but who cares what it looks like on the outside? It's what's on the inside that matters, so let's check it out. Okay, so this is the inside. What I've done is any kind of bits of bracken that's sticking down, any of those roots and those long stems, I've trimmed those off just to make sure there's as much space as possible in there. There's definitely enough room for 2 people, and it can comfortably fit one quite easily. Let's check it out. Okay, so I was saying about 2 people. You can see there's easily enough room for one person lying down that way, and enough room this side for another person lying down that way. This is kind of a rush job really, so there's definitely some gaps still. What I'll do is I'd put more logs definitely to fill in those gaps there, because if it did rain quite heavy it might push that bracket in. So I'd put some more logs there. Nobody's perfect, so that's, you know, just evaluating here. What I've done as well, started to do, I'm running out of time there, is I've actually started to use the back of my blade, the sword here. The sword? The saw. I've used the back of the saw here, and I've just started to sweep the bottom bit up just against the side here, and that acts as kind of a wind shelter, draft shelter, just to stop those cold drafts coming in the mornings. And it also helps me clear an area that I can lie on. And if I wanted to make this extra comfortable, I could get a lot more bracken and I could lie that down in here. You know, pile it up a bit, because you want to be raised up off the floor when you're sleeping. You don't want to be directly on the floor, so I could raise it up, you know, maybe a foot or something, and that would provide something comfortable to sleep on and help keep the draft and the cold out. But for now, all I've done is just started to move with the back of my blade, just started to push it up against there just to stop that draft, and I do that all the way around the edges just to seal off that draft. Obviously there's some gaps at the back there which I would patch up with some sticks and just make it a bit more sealed and waterproof, but underneath it feels pretty secure. I'd put a lot more bracken on this, but I don't really have the time at the moment. It's probably something I can come back to. Hope the videos helped you guys. Hope you got a couple of tips.